So every content area begins with the standards, right? And the creation of the exam, what they do is they take our state standards, which is this document. This is the science standards 4 through 8, and every different area, the science standards for EC through 6 are different, right? But they build on each other. Those early child ones are the building blocks that the middle ground is going to build on, and then we get to science 7 through 12. The exam, the TEXES science 4 through 8, it is made up of this document here, which is what you need to know and what you need to be able to do in a science classroom as the science teacher. Coupled with go look your TEKS. And so since yours is 4 through 8, some of your TEKS are in the elementary section, right? Because 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade is still considered elementary. It's EC through 6 is the certification for elementary, right? And then everything that's junior high is 4 through 8. There's overlap so that we know a little bit of what they know and we build on each other's knowledge. So in order for your studying purposes, I want for you to do it like a really deep dive of both your TEKS and your standards. So I want for you to print this document out, annotate it, which means that you are highlighting things, obviously not just anything and everything, but making sure that you're making notes, like wherever you have to look up something or you make connections with something else, making sure that the concepts and topics that are listed in the knowledge section of this document that you are familiar with. And by familiar, I mean that you can have a discussion and sort of explain that particular aspect of life science or earth, space, and science. And if you don't, then that's an area that you need to research. And I have put in this folder, which I'll give you access to just as soon as we hang up with each other. It also has a Mometrics PDF, and that's a yellow one. And that one, it's really not a good study manual because of its questions at the end or the assessment, but it is really good as far as having like rich content knowledge. So any of the things having to do with the scientific method or life science, any of those concepts, physical science, earth and space, those ideas and those sort of objectives that you need to know, they're going to be in that Mometrics document. Now, you also have to know that information, but you need to know how to apply it in a classroom setting, right? How do I take this knowledge and then do the things that I need to be able to do? So you'll see here, and again, the test maker gets the information for your exam from 2 sources, and that's it. They get it from this document, which is the standards, and from the TEKS. They look at what do you need to know about 4th grade science, 5th grade science. And so it behooves you must do it, to go through each of those grade levels in the TEKS, right? The 4th grade TEKS. Each of those grade levels is going to be controlled by an overarching introduction, an idea with which the state made the content area for. Like, we want our students to learn science for this particular goal for Texas. This is like why we do what we do and the areas that we want to hit. It's important that you are familiar with the overarching goal for all science students, and thusly the goal for science teachers. And then to study in that way and to look at, and we're going to take a look at it in a second, because I want to bring your attention to, you have physical science, life science, earth and space science, unifying concepts. And when we go and do sort of a deep dive, which I'm going to want you to do as well, into the elementary, it's not elementary, into all the TEKS, take a look at 4th grade here. You'll see the sort of overarching goals for students in science, and then it'll actually be broken down into those different ideas. Scientific investigation and reasoning is one sort of topic area category under which the science instruction, each grade level is going to be building in knowledge and skill in that area in scientific investigation and reasoning. You see again here, where is it? Earth and space, organisms and environments. And so and we'll go, and I'll give you an sort of just a idea in kindergarten, and it shows you in kindergarten through 5th grade, content is organized in recurring strands, concepts with each grade level. So they had this like knowledge in each of these strands. You have to know this because you still have 4th and 5th graders, right? So they're dictated by recurring strands or categories, if you will. And they're listed here for you. And the concepts within each grade level build on prior knowledge. They prepare students for the next grade level. What I'm going to want you to do is to look at the 4th grade, make sure that you're comfortable with all of the knowledge and skills that the students, because remember, this is what the students need to be able to do before they leave your classroom. So if they need to be able to do it, you know, certainly you need to be able to do it. I'm not quite sure. I see. These are the newly adopted ones. So we're going to look at the newly adopted ones. I don't know why I did the like old ones for 4th grade. And here it is. So this is 4th grade. We have kindergarten, the same thing, scientific and engineering practices. Scientific inquiry is planned and deliberate investigation of the natural world using scientific and engineering practices. And so the way that they changed it before with the TEKS is they've really sort of tried to marry or connect like-minded content areas or subjects, because obviously engineering is under science, and we need to, whenever possible, make connections between the content or the subject that the student is learning and actual examples of how it exists in the real world. And so I try to tell my math teachers every day, ask your students, how did you use or see numbers yesterday? Because math is nothing to be afraid of, and we use numbers and math in so many areas. I mean, you cannot separate math and science from each other. We cannot have real scientific inquiry without being able to measure and without being able to use mathematics. So sort of re-envisioning the subjects is what they did to make clearer connections and sort of a clearer pathway, like, hey, we want our kids to be awesome at science because we want them to grow up to be engineers. You want them to make that connection that like discovery and questioning has all of this real world use and consequence more than ever. I mean, not more than ever, always, but now we need them to make that connection now more than ever. So scientific methods of investigation are descriptive, correlative, comparative, or experimental. Methods chosen should be appropriate for age, age group and grade level, and the question being asked. Student learning for different types of information, including descriptive investigations, which have no hypothesis that tentatively answers the research question and involves collecting data and recording observations. So these are particular things the state is saying students are going to be learning and doing. That means you need to be familiar with the goals that the state has for this content for each of the grade levels. So I would make like one of those oversized cards, note cards, and do like because you're going to need this, wherever you are placed on your campus. I don't know if you'll particularly do 4th grade, but certainly 6th, 7th, and 8th. Make sure, because they move people all the time. I mean, I would be really into teaching 7th grade writing, and then you're doing 8th grade, or if I'm at the high school, I mean, they move you just every year. And so you have to be incredibly proficient and competent in what is expected at each grade level and age group for your content area. And then like what particular changes happen, like you should know that nuance change. Like students don't need to know that, but you need to know like what is the big difference in science instruction between 4th grade and 5th grade, between 6th grade and 7th grade. Like what is the rigorous jump, or what is the new introduction of a new area, new complexity, new skill level. So taking into account those things, it's very important. On the exam, they're not just going to ask you straightforward science questions. They're going to say, in Miss Salceda's 6th grade science class, the students have been learning about, you know, weather erosion or whatever in land formations. And so which of the following activities would be most appropriate for the students having difficulty, you know, remembering different. So they're going to give you a lot there. You need to be able to know what they need to do. Like what is an appropriate activity for 6th graders? What would be the best for that age group, for the particular student that they described, or for the particular goal that the teacher in the scenario has. And so in order for you to be able to be a careful and mindful reader in this critical reading exam, which is every TEXES exam, you have to be competent in the standards and in the TEKS. So for between now and the next time we meet, I'm going to want for you to do that deep dive. Take a look at the standards, familiarize yourself with each of them. We're just going to look at one sort of quickly. You'll see here on the left-hand side, so overarching, you have that, what the standard's about. You should be able to say, okay, well, this isn't about safety and logistics. That's how I would, in my own terms, think about this standard, because it's about you're managing the classroom, you managing every environment. Because a science teacher, it's kind of cool, you get to have these like different environments, but that means that comes with additional responsibility, because as an English language arts teacher who is certified in 4 through 8 and 7 through 12, I had to make sure my students were safe in my classroom, right? We didn't really go to swamps or to take, you know, we didn't go collecting specimens, or, you know, so a science teacher, hypothetically and hopefully, is doing lots of experimentation, going to different environments, right, during the classroom time, whether it's just to the field behind the school or the creek or wherever. Whatever you can find, even if there's a creek 2 like streets down, if you can get permission to walk down there, you know, to like take water specimens. Kids remember that kind of assignment and will turn into a scientist on that assignment day more than any other thing. But in order to do that, you have to keep kids safe, right? And so that means that thinking about your lessons beforehand, and obviously you have sort of overarching science lab discussions and lessons and you know, assignments. You might even have quizzes over that kind of stuff. But as the need arises in the field and in the lab and in other sort of learning environments, you may need to readjust your safety procedures, right? And even your behavioral procedures, right? So like if you're used to having class in your for science class in your classroom, 5th grade teacher, and you just gotten permission to go to the creek behind the school, you know, from teachers and from principal, administration, and parents, what would be the most reasonable or appropriate next step for Ms. Salceda to take? And that would be to assess safety. Like, what safety rules, now that I'm going to a new environment, if I'm going to a creek, we have to have a discussion about horseplay, about, you know, responsible collecting of specimens. You don't want kids throwing each other into the creek, throwing specimens on each other. I mean, you have to have a discussion about how scientists or professionals, and they go out, collect specimens, and they don't want them to be, contaminated, and they want to be professional, and that means that you hold yourself at it. So it's a totally different discussion, and it needs to be something that is done via writing, having a discussion about it, where you include and say, guys, we're going to be going to the creek. What sort of new rules might we expect? And when you include them, this is just a pedagogical thing. When you include students in the sort of discussion and implementing and creation or composing of expectations, and that doesn't mean that you're not going to include something that they don't say. But if I'm taking my kids, my 5th grade kids, to the creek for the first time, I'm going to say, guys, we just got permission to go to the creek for the first time ever. What sort of new rules might we want to include in order to be safe at the creek? And by the way, to ensure that the principal allows us to do more fun and cool experiments like this and let the students come up with it. We can't throw people into the water. Great point. Excellent point. We can't throw people in the water. Their parents are going to be very annoyed when they have to come and give them things. And then we're scientists. Scientists don't go to the ocean and throw each other off the boat while they're trying to tag sharks. We don't do that. It's a very serious business. And when we go out, so, depending on what the grade level is, and what you're doing, having that conversation, including them, will ensure that they, rise to your expectations, because it's sort of like a social contract. Like, yeah, I'm the one that said we shouldn't throw people in the water, and I'm going to throw people in the water. That's less likely to happen. So having those conversations, very important. As you go through here, look, you'll note or sort of notice that on the left-hand side, the column is dictated by a number and then the letter K. And that's because these are your knowledge standards. This is everything you need to know before you enter the classroom. And each of these is sort of like, each of these standards that are listed are like a suitcase that, if you open it up, has a whole bunch of junk in it. And so it is very important that you understand the sort of multifaceted junk that's in each of these standards. Let's take a look at 1.8K, potential safety hazards in the field. Insect bites, poisonous plants, getting thrown in a creek, wherever you are, and depending on the new scenario or the field experience, it's very important, if you are taking students out to the fields, that you absolutely make sure that you know what students have allergies. And I say this just from personal experience. My second child, my first daughter out of 5 children, she is deathly allergic since her beginning, even when she was in kinder. And she couldn't have a PD EpiPen there at that point because she was so tiny, like she just weighs nothing. Now she's a senior, but the protocol for her, because she was ineligible for the PD EpiPen weight-wise, was that she couldn't do any field experiments, which was totally a bummer for her, right? And kindergarten, if they wanted to go pick flowers for whatever it was that we're doing, or for whatever for science, she couldn't do any of that. They'd send her to a computer lab while they went to go do all that fun, cool stuff. And because we couldn't risk that. And if she perchance got bitten by even an ant in school, because she would go into anaphylactic shock, then the protocol was to give her Benadryl and call the ambulance until she got an EpiPen, and then she could go out with everyone else. She just had to have the EpiPen, right? That is important for science teachers to know, because you're going to be in the field. She's not just allergic to bees. She's like allergic to little bitty ants. Like, she's allergic to all sorts of insects. And so for her, and she is a scientist, just a phenom, like National Honor Society, varsity swim, amazingness. And it was like a huge detriment to her having this allergy, but she does not allow it to stop her. But it's something that is very serious and that she has to be super proactive about. And I expect all of her scientists, I mean, obviously I let them know as well, but Some parents don't. And so you need to make sure that you check your IEPs and that you know who has, or 504 plans, who has needs in your classroom and how that is going to affect or impair safety of your students, whether it be in your classroom, during labs and you have students in wheelchairs, whatever the case may be, that, making those adjustments to ensure that students are safe, during their class time. And if you look at the right-hand side, this will typically be where the answers will be from on the exam, because this is going to be your application of the knowledge. So all of those case standards on the left-hand side, let's see, these teacher knowledge, what the teachers need to know, you apply it on this section. And so this, more than likely, the teacher on the exam is going to be doing something from the right-hand column. They will have given you several things, little clues, and you need to see what information and what have they given me, what can I apply to be the most appropriate next assignment, the most appropriate next step. They won't always be like that. Some of them will be straight out knowledge, but for the most part, they are going to be your application of it. It's going to come from this right-hand column. So you will be, let me see, recycle, reuse, conserve laboratory resources as appropriate. That's something that you have to do. I don't know how they would make that into, let me try to find something. Design and conduct inquiry-based scientific investigations. Now, we want all Texas teachers to implement inquiry-based learning, and that's where the students are essentially just like inquisitive, and we pose questions and they answer questions, but it brings up new questions and it takes them down a new way of discovery. And science class, obviously, for obvious reasons, because it is like literally based on inquiry, lends itself so easily to inquiry-based, curriculum. And so we want to design, whenever possible, scientific investigations where they ask questions, non-experimental and experimental designs. Display and model scientific attributes such as curiosity, openness to new ideas, and to skepticism. I mean, that means, I'm sure they put it in there for this reason, but there are some people who would say that creationism is, an equal sort of science. Now, I am skeptical of this for several reasons. That I am open to curiosity, but I must go back to the science that we have and the lack of sort of facts. So you can entertain different ideas, and you should, because it isn't science if you just say, oh, well, my way's the way and there's no other way. I'm not even going to think about it or discuss it. Like, okay, well, let's think about why you might feel that, for instance, evolution is not a real thing, because you will have students who raise their hands and say, Miss Salceda, my parents don't believe in evolution. Like, God created all the animals and all the whatever, and none of that, blah, blah, blah. Darwin is also not true. And so and that's a real thing, that which they learn from their parents, and they go and they talk to a whole bunch of other people who believe the same thing. And so you are not going to want to say, shut it down and be like, no, that's absolutely completely wrong. Your parents don't know what they're talking about. My way's the right way. You want to sort of, let's take a look at it like from a scientific, I know a lot of people, think about that and lead them through a scientific review of that inquiry, right? That's a question. Their question is my thinking valid, or is your thinking valid? Well, I don't know which is valid. Let's investigate together and see which is which. We'll do a little T-chart, every question and every sort of assertion, if you will, is an avenue for new discovery, right? And for new learning. So being open to entertain things, but also you have a duty to steer students in a particular fashion towards reality. I had a student, and this is something that I mention, and it's such a good and ridiculous example of me having to like shut the shite down, right? So I had a student when I was working for the first time for a very affluent middle school. Nobody has free lunch at the school, and their parents all drive very, very fancy cars. It's a very well-to-do public middle school. And I had taught at that point English language arts and reading for like 13 years. And I had never encountered a student who denied the Holocaust ever in my life. Vehemently, like just like passionately, like this is a real take on reality. And so it was something that I had to not even entertain because it was so grotesque in many ways and at the times. And I kind of felt like, and it was at the beginning of a very strange time in our history where people were just sort of saying outrageous things for no reason. And so I shut it down and didn't let it go further in my class. And at that point, there were two teachers. I was the reading teacher and there was a writing teacher. And at that school, we were lucky enough to have had for the past 3 years a Holocaust survivor come speak to our 8th graders. And so writing teachers got to choose questions from their students to ask when she comes, you know. He was not chosen. I knew for a fact, and he made his way to the stage. So it was so crazy, the passion that this kid had for something, and he was so hateful about it. He made it onto the stage. And I remember during I looked at the writing teacher and was like, he's not like, and I didn't choose him. She's like, no, no, no. And the history teacher went immediately, and he had the time to, you know, say a few words. It was pretty crazy. But you know, some things are worthy of discussion, but there's like a fine line, you know. And so you just have to like toe the line. Science is a great class though, because it's just like, okay, well, let's look into it. Let's look into if the Holocaust isn't a real thing, you know. Let us delve. It's awful and shocking, and the proof is just, it's sickening. And so anyway, and actually we had Jewish students at the time. It was a very complex year, a very, very strange situation. Had students celebrating bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs, and a student denying the Holocaust. So I want for you to go through this. Make sure that you do a close reading, that you are comfortable, you know, with each of the standards and how you're supposed to be able to sort of be implementing those standards. Encourage students' self-motivation in their own learning. We know that we do that by doing things that are interesting to the kids. So my example about the students going behind their elementary to, you know, pick up samples to look at underneath the microscope, even if they're just going to be learning how to like come into focus, like they're not going to be, I don't know, looking at the cellular makeup of stuff, but just like being able to bring their microscope into focus itself. Be pretty cool to go collect the stuff. Knowing that your 5th grade students are going to enjoy that is part of creating activities and lessons and investigations that are going to help encourage self-motivation. You know, the kids are going to be better or more engaged at the task of trying to focus their microscopes, if it was their sample that they're now putting on the slides to look through. And so it becomes an extra level. This is mine that I went out into the world in the creek and I got. And that adds that little self-motivation in their own learning. You might even have kids who can focus it and say, okay, well, how do I know what I'm looking at? Like, tell me what I'm looking at now. I want to know the next step. And that's how you know that you won. When they want to know the next, like, okay, now I got this. What does this mean? What are we doing now? They're invested in their learning. That opened, their curiosity. And so we want to try to do that as much as possible. So I'm going to end with you here today with that. And then I'm going to email you these resources, and we can meet again to take a look at some particular questions and to go through some best practices.
I have a few quick questions.
Absolutely.
Right now, I'm a permanent sub for science for 6th grade. Who do I send the documents to that I'm in the position right now?
Oh, Miss Cardenas, maybe?
I got an email like a few weeks ago. It's like somewhere in my history of the emails.
Okay, yeah, I know how that goes. Trust me, I'm trying to cut my emails down after I've been sick. So yeah, I think so. Either that or possibly maybe Miss Garza.
Yeah, I'll look through the emails first, or I'll go through Teacher Builder, the website. I think on there you can upload them. But yeah, I just need the access for the Google Drive pretty much because I didn't have that. I just had the 240 tutoring.
Absolutely. I'm going to send that to you right now. And then, so you'll get these, let me go back and show you, you'll get, chihuahuas. Okay. So you'll get this. And so here are your TEKS, and it's just like, it's not your TEKS because, they've been like this forever, but you'll just like click on this and it'll take you to, this no, it's going to take you here where you'll have to go to the elementary section and the middle school sections to look at those. The TEA has never had a version where it's like you can download the PDF of your TEKS, which would be so useful. Some districts provide that for their teachers, but so I put that in there for you there and sort of, gave you what I'd like for you to do. Just be familiar with all of those concepts, and then how does it change? What's the nuance change between science 6th grade and science 7th grade? What's the difference between science 7th grade and science 8th grade? Now they're going to have those strands, right, that they're going to be developing in more sort of rigorous and complex ways as they get older and go through the grade levels.
Yeah, I'll look into it because right now I'm at work and the kids are already wanting to come in.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yes. You get going and I will send this to you. You have a beautiful rest of your day.
Yeah, I'll schedule another meeting later this week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.